Good morning. Welcome to our second Tanya Shir. We're studying what's called the Sha'ar, which means the introductory page to Tanya. We started it last week and we'll continue Avodas Hashem this week. In the introductory page to Tanya, the Alter Rebbe writes that the entire Tanya is based on the pasuk Ki korov eilecha hadover ma'od beficha u'bilvavcha la'asaysay. And the purpose of Tanya is levayer hetiv, to explain well eichu korov ma'od. How is it korov ma'od, the concept of beficha bilvavcha la'asaysay? So last week we learned that beficha, the words beficha bilvavcha la'asaysay, in your mouth, in your heart to do it, refers to, as the Alter Rebbe will elaborate later, refers to really the only three things that a person has immediate and direct control over. Pretty shocking if you truly absorb it, but the idea is that we don't really have immediate control over anything else, if we have any control at all. Known as machshava dibur u'maaseh, thought, speech, and action. And the pasuk is really telling us that a Jew, it's accessible to every single one of us, not just accessible, but very accessible. Korov elecha hadover ma'od. All right, every word of this pasuk later will be analyzed. What does it mean, korov, and what does it mean, ma'od, etc. But for now, we're just studying the opening page. So the idea of the opening page, the Alter Rebbe wants to explain, here in time to come to explain, how is this accessible for every person to be perfect, basically, in thought, speech, and action, to only say, and to only think what it is that they're supposed to do, say, and think in the service of Hashem and everything that we're supposed to do in this world. Okay. The crux of the explanation, as we started learning last week, the crux of the explanation is korov eilecha hadover ma'od. It's accessible and it's available to a Jew to develop within themselves the emotion of love and fear of Hashem. And then when you are in an emotional state where you love and fear Hashem, so we are very emotionally driven human beings. Human beings are very emotionally driven creatures. So when a person is in love with Hashem and has great awe and fear of Hashem, so then of course it's korov eilecha hadover ma'od beficha bilvavcha la'asaysay, because you're imbued emotionally this way. And of course, the stronger the emotions, the more intense these types of emotions, the more accessible, the more a person is motivated to do what it is that they're to serve Hashem perfectly, or as close to perfection as possible in thought, speech, and action, right? So it was like if you went to a person and you said to them, well, would you be prepared to wake up every night in the middle of the night 3 or 4 times, after every couple of hours, would you be prepared to wake up and go and take care of somebody? And the answer is no, thank you. I'd like to sleep through the night. Thank you very much. What if that somebody you have to take care of is your own child or your own flesh and blood, or somebody, a very, very close and dear loved one? Well, then the answer is, of course, nobody enjoys being sleep deprived. Nobody enjoys, etc. But if we love the person, then of course, and of course we'd be motivated and prepared to do this. So this is inherently what Tanya is coming to explain. Korov eilecha hadover ma'od, that it's very close, very accessible to a person to serve Hashem this way. Once we develop within ourselves the necessary emotions of love and fear of Hashem. Okay, fantastic. Now, how do you develop these emotions, love and fear of Hashem? So this is what Tanya is coming to explain. How do you develop these emotions? Okay. Now the Alter Rebbe adds, and again we learned this inside last week. It is a text-based shir. So again, I'm still on the Sha'ar, on the opening page of Tanya. The lessons of Tanya is in page 1. So Alter Rebbe writes, "Miyusad al pasuk ki korov eilecha hadover ma'od beficha bilvavcha la'asaysay," that the Tanya, definitely Sefer Shel Beinanim, the first section of Tanya, is based on this pasuk. Levar hate of the intent here, the mission statement of this part of Tanya is to explain well eichu korov ma'od, how it is accessible, how do we develop these emotions of love and fear of Hashem. And then Alter Rebbe adds the words b'derech arucha uktzara, in a way which is long, in a lengthy and short way. Now, what does that mean, in a lengthy and short way? So the simple understanding of what's written when Alter Rebbe says, we're going to explain it b'derech harucha u'ktsara, in a long and short way, is that Alter Rebbe is talking about two explanations. Because generally speaking, the Alter Rebbe and Tanya will give us two paths on how to develop these emotions of love and fear of Hashem. There is a longer way, and there is a shorter way. The longer way, I believe I mentioned this last week, at least briefly. The longer way is described in the first 17 chapters of Tanya, from 1 Aleph through Yud Zayin. The second way, basically, from Yud Ches through Chafei, is from chapter 18 through 25. Why is one called a longer way and one called a shorter way? In very brief, and again, we'll discuss this in Mirza Hashem over the next couple of weeks and months as we learn it inside. Why is one called a long way and one called a short way? So the idea, the long way is based on the idea that intellect can produce emotions. So the argument in the first 17 chapters of Tanya is that if a Jew will meditate, and if a Jew will fill their heads with the right ideas and concepts and about Hashem, about the Eibishter, and reflect on them and allow their minds to marinate in this long enough, eventually it'll produce emotions. That's called b'derech harucha. That's called the long way because it takes a tremendous amount of meditation and study and prayer and work, and you have to have a lot of patience. That's one. The other explanation is called b'derech ktsara, the short way. This is the explanation again from Perek Yud Ches through Chafei, and this is a different explanation. This explanation argues that actually, inherently, we already have these emotions. Alter Rebbe will call it ava misateres. It may be hidden, it may be some work in order to access it, etc. But actually, it's already there. The proof that it's already there, the Alter Rebbe will develop a whole thesis, if you will, on this. The proof that it's already there is that a Yid, if necessary, Rahman al-Islam, at the drop of a hat, is prepared to have Mesiras Nefesh, is prepared to die al Kiddush Hashem. Even if the person until then lives a life which seems very foreign to that. This proves, says the Alter Rebbe, that we're not creating emotions that don't already exist. They're already there. We just need to find a way to fan the flames, to blow on the coals, and sort of bring out these emotions within the Yid, and then the Jew will burn with a flame of fire of love and fear of Hashem. So this is a shorter path, if you will, called b'derech ktsara. And this again is the simple meaning of what the Alter Rebbe means when he says we're going to explain the b'derech harucha ktsara, a long way and a short way. The long way, the intellect can produce these emotions, can create these emotions. The short way, that the emotions are already there and they just need to be revealed. All right. Now the obvious question is, why do you need both, right? If the emotions are already there, why do you have to create them? If you create them, why they're already there? So this actually turns out the emotions are not exactly the same. It's two different types of ava, and again, we'll get to that later. But for now, I want to give over, at least mamash, just for a couple of minutes, something that whenever Tanya is learned, and we come to these words, b'derech harucha u'ktsara, that Alter Rebbe says, in which he gives the mission statement for the whole thing, b'derech harucha u'ktsara, that Tanya will explain that a Yid can serve Hashem, b'machshava dibur u'maiser, ba'ava v'yira, b'derech harucha u'ktsara. So the Rabbeim and Chassidim would always say that the Alter Rebbe is hinting here, he's referencing a story in the Gemara where these words, b'derech harucha u'ktsara, are used, and there's tremendous significance here in what's being written. So this story is from the Gemara. It's from Masechta Avodas Hashem, Daf Nun Gimel Amud Beis, and it's from one of the sages of the Mishnah called Rabbi Shua ben Chananya. So Rabbi Shua ben Chananya talks about how he was upstaged, how he was outsmarted 3 times in his life. You get the sense that he's talking about how he was experiencing a sense of humility, right? He basically says, I'll read you the words. He says, "Me'olam lo natzchuni adam, miyamai, miyamai lo natzchuni adam, chutz me'isha tinoik v'tinoikas." He says, Rabbi Shua ben Chananya says, I never lost an argument in my life, except 3. Once with a woman, once with a young girl, and once with a young boy. And he talks about these events, these occurrences where once a woman upstaged him, once a young girl upstaged him, and once he was outsmarted, if you will, by a tinoik, which of course it doesn't mean, in context, doesn't mean a baby. It means a young boy. What was the story? And he tells the story, mamash 3 or 4 lines, and when you read it at first, it seems like, in sort of classic Gemara style, you're like, well, what's the significance of this? But there's a tremendous depth here. Pam achas, says Rabbi Yeshua ben Chananya, Yisi mahalach baderach. I was once traveling. V'ro'isi tinoik yoshev al parshas drachim. Says Yeshua ben Chananya, I was traveling along the way, and I saw a young boy sitting at the intersection. V'yomarti loy, and I said to him, Be'eze derech nelech la'ir. I'd like to enter the city. I need to enter this particular city. Some of the commentaries, if I remember correctly, say it was the city of Yerushalayim. But the Gemara doesn't say it. It says he wanted to go into the city. So he asked the boy sitting at this intersection. Clearly the kid's from around here, right? Surely the kid would know, which road shall I take to go to the city? Omar Li, so the boy gave me an answer, a Yiddish answer. Again, if it was Yerushalayim, it was with Yerushalmi Shel Chochmeh. He gave him, instead of a direct answer, take this road or that road, he gave him a confusing answer. Zu k'tzora v'arucha, v'zu arucha u'k'tzora. Well, there are 2 roads, said the young boy. This one is short and long. And the other one is long and short. That was it. That's all the Gemara records. The kid says. Says Rabbi Yeshua ben Chananya, no, which road do you choose? The short, long road or the long, short road? At first I took the road that was short and long. The road, says Rabbi Yeshua Chananya, led me right to the city. But when I got there, I discovered that the road I had taken brought me to the city, but there were ganos, there were gardens and orchards in the way. I couldn't actually get in. So I went back I retracted my steps, I went back to the intersection, and I met the same little kid who's still sitting there. Amarti loy, I said to him, B'ni, my son, haloy amarti li k'tzara. You told me that this was the short road. Omar Li, the boy said to me, V'lo yamarti l'cha arucha. Did I not tell you that it was the long road? Neshaktiv al roshai, says Rabbi Yeshua ben Chananya. I kissed him on his head. V'yamarti lo, and he said to him, Ashreichem Yisrael, how fortunate are you, the Jewish people. Shekulchem chachomim gedolim atem. You are all such wise people. From your greatest, from your old to your young. That's the story. All right. So again, Rabbi Yeshua ben Chananya is traveling. I was once traveling on the road. He gets to an intersection. He sees a little boy sitting at the intersection. He asks him which road to take. The boy says, this road is short and long. The other road is long and short. Rabbi Yeshua ben Chananya shows the road that the kid pointed to that was short and long. It takes him right to the city, but he can't get into the city because it's surrounded by gardens and orchards. He retracts his steps. He finds the kid. He says, B'ni, my son, you told me this was the short road. The kid says, didn't I tell you it was the long road? I kissed him on his head. And I said to him, Ashreichem Yisrael, how fortunate are you, the Jewish people. Kulchem chachomim gedolim. Atem, you're all such wise people from your old to your young. Okay. I don't want to sort of get too carried away here, but let's ask some of the obvious questions. First of all, what does it mean that a road is short and long? What does it mean that a road is long and short? What does that mean? It's either short or it's long. Question 1. Question 2, why did the kid talk that way? Why did the kid not tell him straight which road to take? Question 3, he takes the road which is short and long. Why? Why didn't he take the road that was long and short? Why did he choose that one? Question 4, he can't get into the city. He comes back to the kid and said, you told me it was a short road. No, he didn't. He said it was a short and long road. And the kid says, I told you it was a long road. No, you didn't. You said it was a short, long road. That's what they would say in French. We can't communicate over here. The kid, all right, the kid was ambiguous, but no need to change what he said. The kid said this road was short and long. So Rabbi Shimon takes it, come back, says to the kid, you told me it was short. The kid says, no, I didn't. I told you it was long. He didn't say it was short, and he didn't say it was long. He said it was short long. And when the kid responds and says, I told you it was long, Rabbi Yeshua ben Chananya kissed him on his head and said, Ashreichem Yisrael, how fortunate are you Jewish people? Kulchem chachamim gedolim batem. You're all such wise people. Now I happen to know a couple of Jews. I would be hard pressed to refer to them as chachamim bechlal. Chachamim gedolim definitely would be difficult to refer to them chachamim. Rabbi Yeshua ben Chananya decided that because this kid told him when he came back that he told him it was a long road, Ashreichem Yisrael shel kulchem chachamim, and he kissed him on the head. Migdolim vad ktana. Okay. So what in heaven's name is going on here? Oh, 1 second. I'm saying this because the idea here, the point here is that the Alter Rebbe Bedafke uses this expression that Tanya is derech harucha o ktsara, is the long short road, as opposed to the short long road. That's what he means. In other words, the Alter Rebbe is hinting or referring to this particular story in the Gemara where there were two options. One road short long, the other one long short. And the Alter Rebbe says the Tanya is going to explain it. The Tanya is going to explain it in a long short way. In other words, not just that we're talking about two different explanations, but in general, the whole Tanya, with all of its explanations, can be described as derech harucha o ktsara. Okay. So what in heaven's name does all of this mean? A couple points. Number one, derech ktsara v'arucha. When you say a way is short and long, the commentaries explain, what the child meant was the road is short, it's a shortcut. You'll get right to the city. But it's long in the sense that although the road will lead you to the city, the road won't take you into the city. You'll get stuck right at the outskirts of the city, and you'll be left there wondering, how do I get in? That's what the child meant when he said Ktsara Barucha. It's a shortcut. It'll get you right to the borders of the city, but only to the borders. To actually be able to enter the city, you will encounter all sorts of challenges and blockages that actually you won't be able to get in. How do we know you won't be able to get in? Because the B'shu B'chalani came right back. When the child said the other road is a long, short road, what he meant to say is that the other road is much longer. It'll take you much longer to get to the city. But once you get there, you'll be able to walk. You'll be able to walk in with ease. That's what the commentaries say that he meant. Rabbi Yeshua ben Chananya understood that this road is a shortcut. So he took the shortcut road. But when he got there, he encountered that he was blocked. He couldn't enter. So he came back and he said to the child, I don't understand. You told me this road is a shortcut. The child said, yes, but I also told you that it's a long road, meaning the shortcut leads you to a place in the city where you cannot get in. The other road is much longer, but once you take that road, you can actually get into the city. In other words, what the child meant was, it depends where you need to go. If you just need to get to the city, but you don't, of course, all of this is metaphoric, in addition to being literal, but all this is it depends where you're going. If you're going to the borders of the city, if you want to hover on the outskirts of the city, by all means, take the short, long road. You'll get there very quickly. You won't be able to get into the city, but you'll be on the outside of the city. You'll be by the gardens and orchards, and you'll be close. If you want to be close, take the short, long road. If you want to get in, take the long, short. Rabbi Shimon Chananya didn't understand this. Now we have to understand why not. But he didn't understand this. He needed to get into the city, but he was in a rush. He wanted to get there soon. So he took the short, long road. When he got there, he couldn't get into the city. So he turned around and he went back to the kid and he said, you told me this is a shortcut. The kid said, yes, I did tell you it's a shortcut. But I meant it's a shortcut to get to there, to get to the city, not into the city. Rabbi Yeshua ben Chananya was very taken by this child's wisdom and he kissed him on the head. Okay. Now, we haven't answered all the questions. What's the significance of this? Why, what's the depth here? So in the context of the way it's explained, when it comes to learning the Sha'ar Blat of Tanya, this is the way I've studied. This is the way it's been taught to me by my teachers and by my mashpiyim like this. It's known, of course, that the teachings of Chassidus, the Baal Shem Tov, came to place a tremendous emphasis not just on serving Hashem technically, not just on serving Hashem, again, in the practicalities, thought, speech, and action, but the emotion of it as well. A person needs to, like we're talking here, a person needs to love Hashem and fear Hashem. A person needs to experience joy in serving Hashem, to develop, to uncover, if you will, this emotional, again, it's one of the accomplishments of Chassidus, one of the ideas, the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov, that a Jew should understand that there's actually a relationship going on here between Hashem and the Jewish people, and that it can be experienced by the person even on an emotional level. And therefore, the Chassidim taught, the Baal Shem Tov taught his Chassidim to daven longer, because davening is the Avodas Hashem. He told them to emphasize being besimcha. He told them to emphasize love. And the Baal Shem Tov explained to the Jews that Hashem loves the Jews. Again, all to develop and to uncover this emotional element between the Jews and Hashem. Okay. Now, for those tzaddikim who always feel, these emotions, for those people whose souls are always on fire, this is wonderful. Great. What about the rest of us mere mortals who have a difficult time tapping into this emotional element of our relationship with Hashem? What do the rest of us do? We don't necessarily wake up in the morning and burn with a fire of love to Hashem, or feel, awestruck by Hashem. We don't necessarily feel that. I heard, incidentally, I'd say a beautiful story. I heard they once came to the Baal Shem Tov, and they said to the Baal Shem Tov, Rebbe, your Chassidim are all crazy. This has been going on for a couple of centuries. He said, Rebbe, your Chassidim are a bunch of mishagoyim. Why? He said, they're always... What did they do wrong? They told the Baal Shem Tov, your Chassidim are always dancing. Your Chassidim are always dancing. There was a time, by the way, where the Chassidim were known as the Freiliche, the Lebedike, the joyous ones. They're always dancing. You walk into a Chassidish shul, or a Chassidish koilel, or a Chassidish yeshiva, and a kalte mitvach, and the guys have their arms on each other's shoulders, and tanzt. Not cases. Why are your Chassidim always dancing? The Baal Shem Tov gave them an incredibly powerful answer. He said there was once a man who walked into a wedding celebration. And this man had never seen a wedding before. And may Hashem protect us, this individual was completely deaf, couldn't hear a thing. And having never walked into a wedding celebration before, he walks in, and it's in the middle of, the first dance, and there's 100, 200, 300 people in this huge dance floor. And they're waving their arms, and they're lifting their legs, and they've got their arms around each other's shoulders, and they're twirling and moving around in circles, umahakt, umaklapt, and jumped. And then he looks up and he sees people with big, large musical instruments, and they're hacking and clapping also. But the individual, loyalenu, is unable to hear. He's never seen or experienced anything like this before, says the Baal Shem Tov. Says he walks into this wedding and he sees an orchestra. And he sees hundreds of Jews, hundreds of people celebrating in a true state of joy, singing and dancing in true simcha. The person who's completely deaf has no idea what's going on. The person never seen this before goes, a bunch of mishagoyim. A bunch of mishagoyim. Who stands there with big metal objects and hacks and claps and blows till you're blue in the face? And everybody else standing around, throwing their arms and legs around. A bunch of mishagoyim. And leaves. Are they mishagoyim? Of course not. What are they? They're besimcha. They're happy. So why does the deaf person not understand what's going on? Because he literally doesn't hear the music. Says the Baal Shem Tov, the Rabbanu Shalom created the world. Eibishter created the world. There's music. There's music. The Eibishter, the world is not dry. Avodas Hashem is not supposed to be lifeless. It's not just a list of do's and don'ts, things you check off on a box. There's a whole orchestra going on here. There's music. He says, I'm trying to teach my Chassidim to hear the music that the Eibishter puts into the creation of the world. That's why they're dancing. All right. Beautiful. So what do you do if you hear the music? You dance. What do you do if you don't hear the music? What do you do if you struggle with developing, what do you do if you struggle with feeling this type of feeling, of emotions in Avodas Hashem? What do you do about that? So here, all the Chassidim, all the Talmudim of the Baal Shem Tov, who followed in the Baal Shem Tov's ways, in the ways of Chassidus, they had all of the eitzes, all of the solutions that were known to Chassidim. What do? You sing, and you close your eyes, and you fabrang, you get together with many others, and you tell stories of tzaddikim, and you repeat divrei Torah, and you spend your life doing your best to inspire yourself and inspire those around you, motivate yourself. Nobody's required to be perfect. We do our best. Along came the Alter Rebbe and said, we're going to develop a new initiative. The novelty of this, at the time, it is difficult to appreciate. In hindsight, it's difficult to appreciate the novelty of the Alter Rebbe's approach. But the novelty of the Alter Rebbe's approach was, he said, we're going to develop these necessary emotions, this necessary emotional state in Avodas Hashem, we're going to develop it intellectually. And the Torah of the Alter Rebbe's Chassidus became known as Chassidus Chabad. Chabad, of course, standing for Chochmah, Bina, and Das, because of the incredible premium that the Alter Rebbe placed on the intellect, on the intellectual capacities, capabilities of a person, which the Alter Rebbe felt was the best way to develop these types of emotions, through taking the intellectual path. And this became the foundation of Chabad. This idea became one of the foundational concepts of Chabad Chassidus, that the emotional state that a Yid needs to be in, which the Baal Shem Tov taught us, we have to feel love and fear of Hashem in order to serve Hashem properly, in order to, so to speak, to hear the music. The Alter Rebbe said the path, if you will, the path to get there is through the mind, through the intellect. Not only was this approach of the Alter Rebbe novel at the time, but it was also incredibly controversial. And the ones who fought it the most fiercely were actually all of the other students of the Baal Shem Tov, other than the Alter Rebbe himself. They all argued and opposed, and I'm going to use the word, and I'm using the word intentionally, they opposed Alter Rebbe viciously, not, God forbid, negatively viciously, but philosophically and religiously and spiritually viciously. They were opposed to this path of the Alter Rebbe of pursuing through the mind, developing these types of emotions. Okay. I just want to finish my point and explain what was the argument. The Alter Rebbe, by calling the Tanya B'derech Harucha U'Ktsara, the Alter Rebbe is framing the argument, if you will. The Alter Rebbe is saying, until now, all the other paths, by all the other students of the Baal Shem Tov, to get to love and fear of Hashem, to get to Korev Elecha Dover Ma'od, their way is a way which is, quote, short and long. My way, says the Alter Rebbe, the way of taking the direction of the intellect, is long and short. Why? Here's the argument. The Alter Rebbe says, if you're not going to take the path of the mind, if you're not going to sit there and analyze it intellectually, philosophically, what will you do? You will do all the other things that the Baal Shem Tov taught to do, right? That Chassidim do. Nigunim and farbrengens and being connected to a tzaddik, of course, and inspiring ideas, etc. The Alter Rebbe says all of these roads, they're derech ksara. They can inspire you. And they can inspire you they're shortcuts. They inspire you relatively quickly. And they'll take you to the city, meaning they'll take you to your destination. They'll take you to a place of love and fear of Hashem. But it's also a derech harucha. The ways are short and also long because, my dear friends, there's something very cruel about, there's something very, pardon my expression, there's something very seductively cruel about inspiration. And you know what it is? It never lasts. Never. Never lasts. People are often very frustrated with this, right? Because we get inspired, we get motivated, not just in Avodas Hashem in general, right? We want to take on healthy habits, but the inspiration doesn't last. Either 5 minutes later or 10 minutes later, or if it's a really good farbrengen, sometimes the next morning you wake up and all the inspiration is gone. Now what? Now what? If all you had was inspiration, if all you had was a niggin that you sang, what happens when the niggin is over? If all you had is the fact that you're connected to this particular tzaddik, what happens when you don't feel connected to the tzaddik? Or what happens when you're not in the presence of the tzaddik? Or what happens, Rahman al-Islam, may Hashem protect us, when the tzaddik passes? It's derech ktsora va'arucha, meaning it's a short road. Inspiration gets you there quick, but it leaves you with nothing. You find yourself outside of the city rather than inside of the city. What about the other path? The other path is described as derech arucha uktsara, the long short road. The long short road means you're not getting anywhere very quickly. You have to sit and philosophize and pontificate and wrestle with yourself intellectually. It's a long road. It's a long road, but when you eventually get there, so to speak, when you arrive, then the emotions that are born out of this intellectual process, you truly own them. They're yours. Nobody can take them away from you. And even with time, as Chassidus explains in many places, even with time, as the fire of these emotions sort of subsides, but once you've, it's like if you've coded the program, then you know how to fix it, right? If you yourself have wired yourself intellectually to bring yourself to this state of an emotional connection to Hashem, even when the emotions subside, they're never lost on you, because you can reignite them and you can go back there immediately on your own. Okay. This is the way it's explained. This is what the Alter Rebbe meant here. The ideas can be developed and should be developed at great length. But this is, I'm sure you're all familiar with this. This is the nakud of the idea. But derech harucha uktsora, Chassidim said, the Rabbeim explained to us. When the Alter Rebbe says derech harucha uktsora, means the Alter Rebbe is talking about Shittas Chabad. Shittas Chabad means to get to Avas Hashem and Yiras Hashem through the seichel, through the chochma, bina, and das. It's derech harucha. It's a very long road. It's much longer than the other roads. The other roads get you there faster, right? The other roads say, hook yourself up to a tzaddik, and the tzaddik will take you all the way through. Watch the tzaddik be inspired by the presence of the tzaddik. Avort, right? An inspiration, a niggin. You watch today. You can watch all of this, of course, on YouTube. You watch many of the Chassidic gatherings, and they gather hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands sometimes, and they all close their eyes and they sing nigunim and they say divrei Torah. It's incredibly powerful. It's incredibly powerful. The Alter Rebbe called it derech ktsora va'arucha because, well, again, there's more to it, but on the simple level, because the inspiration doesn't last. So you always need more and more and more and more and more. Okay. There's more to it. You should say there's more to it, because it doesn't just mean the inspiration doesn't last. The fact that the inspiration doesn't last means that the inspiration, even while it is there, is superficial. But maybe more of that later. Okay. The Alter Rebbe said the path of Chabad, the path of the Tanya, is through seichel, chochma, bina, and das, and his bonanus, meditation, contemplation. It's derech harucha uktsora. It's much longer, but it'll get you there. All right. He was fiercely opposed by the other students of the Baal Shem Tov, and they had mainly, what I can think of, I'm sure there's more, they had mainly 5 arguments. They had mainly 5 concerns with the path of the Alter Rebbe. First of all, of course, the one we said, it takes a long time. Who wants to wait 10, 20, 30, 40 years until you can develop your intellect enough to come and love and fear Hashem? I mean, in the meanwhile, you have to serve Hashem every day. That's the obvious one. Wait, they said. Wait, they argued. Intellect, human intellect is unpredictable, unreliable, and can be manipulated. You sure you want to hook your wagon to this particular horse, so to speak? You sure you want to count on Seichel? Seichel can be very disappointing. Seichel can take you to very dark places. We don't like that, they argued. You're placing too much faith in a very unreliable system. Argument number 3. Everybody has different intellectual capabilities. Some people are more advanced intellectually, some of us much less. Not everybody is that smart. You want to tell every Korev, the words Korev Elecha Dover Moed is written to everybody. It's not only to Chachamim. Everybody is good to be told Korev Elecha Dover Moed. What about those individuals who are just not developed intellectually? What about them? What are they going to do? They just don't seem to be capable. Number 4, intellect. Intellect is cold. They looked at intellect in general as basically a klipa, basically a negativity. It's something we have to deal with. It's something we have to work with. But they didn't see it as an asset in avodas. This is the road to Avodas Hashem. Seichel is cold, selfish. A person we're wired to think in ways that suit us, not that suit somebody else. And then finally, argument number 5, they said, what are you going to use your seichel for? Understanding Hashem? Godliness? You're trying to master godliness through human intellect? That's like trying to put an elephant through the eye hole of a needle. And obviously infinitely more. It doesn't fit. In Yiddish we say, seichel is nishken keli. Seichel is not a keli to Hashem, to godliness. How can you do that? How can you even claim? What a silly notion. Instead, the Alter Rebbe's chaverim, his fellow colleagues, students of the Baal Shem Tov, they said to the Alter Rebbe, stop putting such a high emphasis on seichel. It's not about seichel. Seichel is here today, gone tomorrow. People think crooked if they even think at all. People think selfish. People takes a long time for people to figure it out, if they even have any brains. And even then, seichel is cold. We're not trying to develop something cold here. We're trying to develop a burning passion for Avodas Hashem. Like, avek to seichel. What are you obsessed with seichel for? Stop. Get inspired. Say a dvar Torah. Connect yourself to a tzaddik, a vort, right? The Chabad Chassidus is written at great length because it's trying to explain intellectually. The other Chassidim are usually written, the Torahs are written much shorter. It's shorter. It's like it's like an electric shock, like a boost to the system, a shot of adrenaline. Gets you going. And what's the problem? It doesn't last. So you take another one. Stay connected. Imagine a person. I charge my phone, right? Charge my phone. I use it all day, and at night it's dead or it's dying. No, it's a problem. Charge it again. Besides, you're going to try to use seichel to understand Hashem. It's never going to work. Stick to the derech ktsora v'aruka, the others said. Stick to the road that's short. True, it doesn't get you into the city, but seichel anyways cannot get you into the city. It'll take you as close as possible, and you'll be connected to the city, and that's it. The Alter Rebbe argued with every single one of these notions. The Alter Rebbe insisted, no, this path of Chabad, of seichel, of understanding, is for everybody, because every Yid has a neshama, and every neshama has chachma, bina, and das. These are powers that are possessed by every single person. And the seichel doesn't have to be cold, and the seichel doesn't have to be selfish, and the seichel doesn't have to have these limitations. If the Eibishter gave us, a Torah, and if the Eibishter gave us a Chassidus, and the Eibishter gave us all this, that means that to the degree that it's possible, the Eibishter allows for the human mind to understand Hashem, to the degree that it's possible. And the Alter Rebbe says we have to take this path, otherwise we're never, quote, going to be able to get into the city. I'm going to add something on my own. If this has been said before and I'm right, I'd be very happy to know that. If this has not been said before and it's just my own Torah's Lakshan, I'm apologizing in advance. But it struck me actually when I was preparing a little bit and read this Gemara and never noticed this before. Something very powerful in the Gemara. Listen to this. Rabbi Shua ben Chananya comes back. He says to the kid, I don't understand. I took you a short road. Right? I was trying to get there quick. You said this road was short. And it was. The kid says, no, I didn't. I told you it was long. He doesn't. The kid says, I told you if you take this road, you weren't going to get there. Rabbi Shua ben Chananya kissed him on the head and he said, Ashreichem Yisrael, shekulchem chachomim gedolim atem. This is why the Alter Rebbe references this story. He kisses the kid on the head. He says, Ashreichem Yisrael, shekulchem chachomim. How fortunate are you, Yisrael? You're all such great chachomim. What's that supposed to mean? Because one kid outsmarted him, therefore all Yidden are such great chachomim. The Alter Rebbe sees in this the whole foundation for Shittas Chabad. Ashreichem Yisrael, cries Rabbi Shua ben Chananya, shekulchem chachomim gdolim atem. Every Yid is a chacham gadol. Now you can say, well, all evidence to the contrary, right? I know a lot of Yidden who are not chachamim gdolim. No, says the Gemara, no. Derech harucha oktzora ashreichem Yisrael shekulchem. Every Yid is a chacham gadol. How? Every Yid has a neshama, the Alter Rebbe will teach us. Every neshama has chachma, bina, and das. Every neshama is wealthy intellectually, wealthy, infinitely wealthy. I don't feel it. I don't understand it. Sit down. Study. Think. Work. I did it once and nothing happened. Let the water drip on the rock. Drip, 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 drip. Study, contemplate, learn. Learn the Mimer, learn the Perek Tanya. Oh, think about it. Digest it intellectually. Chew it over. Be malagera. Chew it over and over and over again in your mind. Start to wrap your head around it. Godliness will flow into your brain. Sooner or later it will work. And you'll be able to get into the city. You'll be able to be a Yid who serves Hashem the way you're supposed to. And no, you won't be tithering on the border of it. You won't be outside, dependent on something else or someone else and never truly inspired on your own. You'll get into the city, meaning to say, in that sense, you'll be connected. The Av V'Yira, your love and fear of Hashem will be yours. You'll be self-fueled rather than always having to get it from somewhere else. I want to finish because, again, I'm going to try to be disciplined to keep always down to 45 minutes. I'm finish with, there's an old, I don't even know if it's a strictly Jewish joke, but it's told in a Jewish way about a Rav who travels. And wherever he goes, he has a wagon driver. And you know how it is, the Rav comes to the city and everybody comes out to greet the Rav. Oh, Shalom Aleichem, Shalom Aleichem. And the Rav goes to shul and hundreds of people gather and the Rav gives a drosha. And he gives a drosha and they pay him, of course. And then he moves on to the next city. And the wagon driver is taking the Rav around for 30, 40 years. One day, as they're driving, the wagon driver tells the Rav, you know, can I ask you a question? Yeah, sure. He says, we've been doing this for 30, 40 years, no? He says to the Rav, you only have 3 droshes. I'm laughing because of how true it is. You only have 3 droshes. And you basically just go 1, 2, 3. One's a little more intellectually engaging, one's a little emotionally engaging, one's maybe a little humorously engaging. You take a look at the crowd, you scan them, you usually get it right, not always, but most of the time you do. And you pick them out of 1, 2, and 3. The Rav goes, yeah, it's true. The wagon driver says, I've heard you give the droshes so many times, I can repeat them verbatim. Not just that, I can laugh where you laugh, I can cough where you cough, I can sneeze where you sneeze. I can do everything. The Rav goes, I'm sure you can. You've been listening to me do it for a long time. The wagon driver says, how about we switch? How about we switch? I'm sure you've been watching me ride a horse for 40 years. I'm sure you picked up a thing or two. We switch clothing. I'll be the Rav, you'll be the wagon driver. And next time we come to the city, Says the wagon driver, ich will give him the drosha. I'll give the speech. I'd love to know what it's like. The Rav looks at the wagon driver. All right. They switch. The Rav puts on the wagon driver clothing. The wagon driver puts on the rabbi's clothing. And they pull up into the city. And sure enough, on cue, the whole city comes running to welcome the wagon driver. I mean, they think it's the Rav, but it's really the wagon driver. And the wagon driver's never had so much covered in his life. It's the best day ever. Shalom aleichem, aleichem shalom. Oh, Rebbe. They bring him to shul. Everybody gathers. And he takes a look at the crowd. He picks a speech and he delivers it, in his opinion, much better than the rabbi, ever. He does a fantastic job. He thunders and yells and bellows. And the crowd is spellbound. Wow! Unbelievable. Such chochmah. Such, azah Rav. But you know how it always is. From the back of the room, there's always one chacham. He raises his hand. He goes, Rebbe, you quoted a Gemara that says this and that. How does the Gemara fit with a different Gemara that says the opposite? Now, of course, he's talking to the wagon driver. The wagon driver is just, he's just giving a memorized speech. He doesn't have a clue. Not this Gemara, not that Gemara. But he's garnished. A guy's asking now, this Gemara fits with that Gemara. What's the wagon driver going to do? He doesn't understand the first Gemara. Never mind, doesn't understand the second Gemara. Definitely doesn't understand the question. What's he going to do? Take off his clothing and go, well, I'm not really the Rav, I'm really the wagon driver. You all know the punchline. He looks at the guy and he says to him, the best defense, of course, is offense. He looks at the guy and says, that's your question? That's your question? The guy goes, yeah. He says, you're not embarrassed, you're not ashamed of yourself to ask such a stupid question. Oh, the guy gets it. Well, what now? He says, this question is so dumb. Even my wagon driver can answer it. And he points here. Wagon driver, you answer the question. And of course, the Rav gets up and, whatever. Either answers the question or doesn't. But that's the point. That's the story. And the idea is that they both know the speech. One knows the speech b'derech k'tzora v'aruka, and the other one knows the speech b'derech arucha k'tzora, meaning one knows the speech because he's worked through the idea, because he learned the Gemaras and he learned the Rambams and he processed the whole thing. Now that he got it, he finally mastered it. The other one knows the speech because he heard someone else say it. Much easier to hear someone else say it and just memorize it. But the one who heard somebody else say it never really got into the speech. So when you ask him a question, he has no idea what to answer. Challenge him, and it's like putting a pin in a balloon. The other one who worked through this, who actually wrote the speech, maybe 30, 40 years ago, but wrote it on his own, he knows it from the Kishkas. So he owns it. The Alter Rebbe said, we're going to have to teach every single Jew to use their mind. Their mind is a titanic engine that the Rebbeinu Shalom has given every single one of us. We have to teach every Yid to use it, to learn to think, to understand Hashem to the extent possible, and to the extent possible, it really is possible. This is the deepest, most powerful way to get into the city of Avodas Hashem, and in the end, Alter Rebbe argued, it's really the only way to actually, again, get into the city. Every other way leaves you by the border. All right, we'll continue Mitzvah Hashem next week. Thank you very much for being here. Have a wonderful week.